Hi there, I'm breaking news reporter Andrew Ford here again with Kepler Funk. Tuesday, a jury recommended that Brandon Bradley, the man found guilty of killing Brevard County Sheriff's Deputy Barbara Pill, should be put to death. I spoke with Juror 107 this morning to get a little bit of insight about the process of finding him guilty and then ultimately recommending a death sentence. Right off, he said the evidence was overwhelming for guilt.
Sure.
They got back in there, and within 10 minutes, they had a 12-0 vote that they thought he should be found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, and that's kind of what you were thinking.
Right. We talked about that briefly. I said this is going to be, they're going to deliberate for about as long as I could have a cup of coffee, and which it was borne out to be true. I don't think it was any tremendous great prognostication by me, but after you and I watched the evidence, we expected that to happen, and it did.
What do you think of the fact that two people disagreed? I know you have a lot of feelings about how Florida doesn't require a unanimous vote on this.
Yeah, it's really a shame to me that we'll never know what people who weren't inclined or that were willing to consider the death as a sentence, what that would have been. Two people who were death qualified. Remember, death qualified are the people that said they would consider the death penalty. Two of those folks believed or hung their hat on that mitigation that we talked about. I suspect, and I don't know if this juror told you or not, that abuse and the drug use during the commission of and prior to the crime, those two folks found mitigating. Remember, the big question we had is, are those jurors going to find it mitigating? Some people find it aggravating. Two of them at least felt it was mitigating enough to not issue a death sentence. The other thing, real quick, it's one thing to talk about. I can vote for death. It's another thing to actually have to do it. And I think that's an extremely daunting task that we ask jurors to do. Some folks may have felt that the aggravators outweighed the mitigators, but they just couldn't put their name or sign that document that would seal Mr. Bradley's death in the death chamber.
So what is next? Now that the jury has made this recommendation, we've got a Spencer hearing coming up. What is that?
Well, before that, the lawyers right now are drafting and putting the final touches on a sentencing memorandum. It's a big legal argument that they would submit to the court, and they're advocating through cases and through a legal brief why the state's going to say why she should uphold the jury's recommendation, and Mr. Moore's side, the defense side, is saying why the judge, who has the power to override the 10-2. That's not going to happen, by the way. Okay, it's not going to happen. There is a Spencer hearing that happens after those memorandums are filed. The Spencer hearing is named after a case. A guy's name was Spencer. What that does is a last chance kind of ditch effort for the defense to present anything that they feel is appropriate just prior to the judge pronouncing the sentence. When the judge sentences, it'll be a written order. She will have it written. She will come out on the bench and read it. There will be nothing off the cuff. It will be read word for word.
Okay, so should she go with what the jury recommended and order a death penalty for Brandon Bradley, what kind of cost is the taxpayers looking at?
Well, you know, my prosecutor friends who I've tried to sway to have the death penalty go away, the only time their one eyebrow raises and they kind of listen to me is when I talk about the cost. And they understand it's extremely millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent by the citizens of Florida in having the death penalty in place in Florida. And the cost of appeals, the cost of all of the manifestations that happen once the government has said we're going to execute one of its citizens, all of the safeguards, that costs money, right? Lawyer time, judge time, deputy time, and the list goes on and on and on. From a fiscal standpoint, the death penalty is indefensible. Okay, whether or not you believe it or not, that's a different issue, but fiscally, it's not even close. Life in prison without parole is clearly less expensive, and we, execute 2 to 3 people a year in the state? 2 to 3 people a year. Start doing the math. The number of inmates that are put on death row far exceeds that number.
Well, thanks again very much for being here with me. We've been here from the beginning of jury selection. We'll be here to the very end. This is Andrew Ford for Florida Today.